This is a hallowed blackface, I think 1967 Princeton amp. It is the sound. I'm having fun. Princeton amp. So the story goes, I have a good friend, Rob, non-musician, great guy. He got bequeathed this from his grandfather, along with we haven't dated it yet, but like a 69 to a 71 Mustang. So it's just been sitting in his garage here in Vegas, and it was just time to let it go. He has other things from his grandfather he wanted to keep. Like I said, he's a non-musician, so he asked me to help him get this ready to sell. Super excited about this. When I plugged in, it sounded great. I called Carl right away. I said, let's just clean it up, see if it's good enough to sell, and date it as well. It was, I think, August, and Carl's like, it's a bit hot here in Vegas, so let's just wait a few weeks until it cools down. So I had it in my studio for a few weeks, and I fell in love with it. So now I'm on the phone with Rob going, I love this, and then that turned into, I'd like to buy it. So that's where we are, and I am the owner of this Princeton, and it has just been serviced by Carl Popek, 1% Tech Audio or 1% Audio?
1% Tech Audio.
1% Tech Audio. And we just had a lot of fun talking about this, but Carl has accurately dated this as a 1966.
Yes.
Princeton. This is a non-reverb Princeton. The Princeton reverb amps are the more valued, but I just play it with at home when I had it for that time. I played it with the reverb, and for it was only working off of one power tube. I'm gonna let Carl talk about it. It sounds so good in my studio, and it was my main studio practice amp, and I'm ready to now make it one of my main recording amps. So blackface Princeton 1966.
Okay, in the restoration, I went through the whole amp. There's some things that I do no matter what for safety, and basically what I did is I took the two-prong plug, put a grounding plug on it. I removed the death cap.
Why is it called a death cap?
Well, on the ground switch, this goes to ground, and the problem is if this ever shorts out, you're going to have a high voltage, the wall voltage, going to the chassis. So that's not good. That's why they call it the death cap, and that gets removed. So, and then after that, what I did is I wired the power section from the power cord to the switches correctly, because in the early Fenders, the neutral went to the fuse holder. You want the hot on the fuse holder. You don't. So that's been done. So that's all wired correctly. Hot on the fuse, three-prong plug.
This is your filter cap?
Yes.
I'm learning. It's not like I know this.
This is a multi-can cap.
Okay.
This is 4 caps in one.
All right.
And basically each section is 20 microfarads, and it's part of the power supply. And after so many years, you always want to replace these caps. The same with the cathode bypass caps. I always check them all for the ESR on each cap, just to see where they're at, and then I measure the value. And to get the amp back up to spec, you want fresh caps. You want it to go for another 10, 15 years. And these are working way beyond what they're actually spec to work for. So I replaced them, and then I measured them. And let's say the value is supposed to be normal is 25 microfarad, 25 volts. These were drifted up to about 32, 33 microfarad. A piece, so it was adding a lot more bass into the circuit and could cause things to get muddy. So cathode bypasses caps replaced, filter cap replaced. This was a power supply, carbon cop power supply resistor that drifted value quite a bit. I replaced that. So that's in the power section.
Okay.
The tubes, pretty much shot. I mean,
check this out. Original RCA tubes, though.
Yeah.
I gotta make that into artwork or something.
Yeah, they're great sounding tubes, but unfortunately, these were like almost 20 milliamps mismatched.
And these are the power tubes?
Yes.
6L6s?
6V6s.
6V6s, and then we switched them out with JJ's 6V6s as well.
Yes. The two tubes that I use, 6V6, are either the JJ or the tongue soles reissues. But what I found out is the tongue sole reissues, they seem not to last as long. But they sound good. Yeah. So your choice is, do you want a real good sounding tube you want to replace all the time, or do you want something, it doesn't quite sound like exactly like a 6V6, but they're rugged and they're full bodied and give headroom. So there's that. The other thing I did is I always check the toggle switches. If you don't feel a good click on them, usually they're kind of to the point of they're eventually going to go, because you're not feeling that snap of the contacts anymore. So I replaced the power switch, and the last thing I did was the bias supply. Unfortunately, the bias supply for a Princeton isn't adjustable, so it all depends on what tubes you're putting in. Some could have a hotter plate current, some could have a weaker plate current, but I always like to get the amp bias to where it should be for the tubes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but when we first brought this to you and we were talking about this, you said back then tubes were so easy to get that if the bias was off or they blew out, they would just throw another tube in there, right?
Exactly. Back in the day, radios had these. The 6V6s were all over the place.
Yeah.
So if you blew out a tube, you could go down to the drugstore and not that expensive and buy another set and just pop them in. Nowadays, tubes aren't that cheap, and you want your amp to be reliable. So if they're biased properly, the amp and tubes will last much longer. So back in the day, I'm just guessing, but you could probably get these for like $2 a piece at the drugstore, or or $5 for a set. So
anyway, I interrupted you. Back to the bias.
Yes, the bias. What I did is I redid the whole bias thing. I put in a new bias cap, and before it was a fixed bias. This resistor helped set the bias, and those two went there. And then you had your AC that went through there and a diode that converted it to DC. So what I did is I put a new cap. I removed this resistor, and on the board actually installed a trim pot with another resistor.
How cool is that?
If you get any sets of tubes, now you can bias specifically for those tubes.
Nice. Where would that trim pot be here?
It's actually, there's a little board up in the corner by the pilot light.
Got it. Okay.
And so now it's an adjustable bias. And I just went ahead, as long as I was replacing that, I took this old carbon comp out that seemed to be drifted quite a bit and put a new diode. So the bias supply was completely rebuilt, and that was done. Every single resistor, every single capacitor, I go through and check the value. So to see if it's drifted up or it has a low value. So that way I know exactly what's going on inside the amplifier.
How cool is that? And that's why you take your amp to Carl at 1% audio. Okay.
Here's the thing with, I see a lot of techs, they do blanket repair. That means that they'll look at all the plate resistors and go, oh, they're all carbon comps. I'm just going to put all metal films in there, and they blanket it across and just do it. Me, if the resistor's good and it's not causing noise, there's no sense replacing it. Plus, another thing is there's a 20% tolerance on these parts. So the values, you kind of have a staggered effect through the amp, and that's kind of part of what makes one amp have a little bit different personality than the other amp. And by going through all these parts, I can recognize the value to be either a positive drift or a negative drift. In certain locations, let's say it's supposed to be 1.5 off a cathode, and it drifts up to 1.7. It's a little bit hotter. Doesn't mean it's bad. And if it sounds good, no reason to replace it. Other places where they drift, like for the output section and all that, you want to make sure those are correct, because if not, you're not going to get the proper balance in the output section that you need. So I look for positive drift and negative drift and go through all those resistors and change them out to what makes the amp perform its best.
I think once again, back to my point one, that's why we bring it to Carl, because I would know nothing.
I got OCD.
I'm still learning how to play guitar.
Yeah, I will go through an amp with my OCD and go back and go, no, that value, it's just a little off, it's not sounding right. I'll change it out,
Well, real quickly, since I'm behind the amp, we have a 10-inch speaker. This is the original speaker. We dated this to be a 66 blackface. And that's what we're looking at. And then I'm hoping that this is solid pine and not particle board. I think.
Well, what they did is, yes, the Baffle is particle board, and they start doing that pretty early on.
But
the cabinet.
The cabinet, yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's just part of the sound. In my opinion, I like the way one cabinet sounds against another cabinet.
Most people don't realize this. This pine was from Northern California, and a lot of the pines aren't the same. So when people build cabinets, let's say it's in South Carolina or something like that, the pine isn't quite the same. And this was older wood. It's even if you knock on it, you can hear a certain resonance or sound, that's different than, let's say, a newer pine that's maybe got more moisture in it. It's a different type of pine, and it just sounds maybe softer, all that. So all those small things contribute to a sound of an amplifier. And it's everything and anything.
I brought it to you. It looked clean to me, but it's a lot cleaner now. Was it super dirty in here?
Yeah. I mean, this is completely wiped down inside. All the dust is off the speaker.
All right. How cool is that?
I actually, the cabinet, what I did is I took the handle off. What I use is like some Dove in hot water with a toothbrush, and I just scrub it, and it gets down in the crevices of the Tolex. That cleans it up real nice. All the knobs I took off, I take the same thing. I spray them. I take a toothbrush. I get all the finger garbage out of the grooves. Shine up the caps there, wipe down the faceplate, and the last place that you'll notice on an amplifier that you'll see dirt is this whole kind of line right there. And sometimes when you just clean up those certain small things, it just makes the amp look so much better. And to me, it even gives you more on the resale value.
Right.
Some people don't care, it's beat up, if it sounds good, it's fine, but if something looks like it's taken care of,
right. Well, it really
more
did.
Desirable.
Yeah, it did look like it was taken care of, brought to you, but it was sitting there for 15 years.
This grill cloth, I'm not even. I mean, I'm looking at it going, is this original? But it's just usually most of them you see tears in them,
and we talked about the parts, but go ahead, Carl.
Well, I kind of went over all the parts.
Right.
The tubes were basically really mismatched.
Right.
Almost 20 milliamps off. So you weren't getting the power you should out of it. You weren't getting the proper sine wave signal, because it was doing half the wave real high and just a little bit on the other. So it's got new tubes in there. I put JJ66. Which are real stout. They're more like little 6L6s. The other tube I like to use is the tongue saw reissues.
Right.
They sound a little bit more like a real 66, but I think it's apples and oranges. It all depends on the player and what they prefer.
You mentioned what the JJ did, and I can't remember if you said maybe more open. But whatever you said, I was like, that sounds like me. So
a little bit more headroom, a little bit fuller.
Okay.
And But if you're playing more towards a lot of breakup and stuff like that, and you wanted that sweeter 6v6 sound, definitely the tongue salts.
Right. I got the, we did a video on upgrading my 73 Bassman to a blackface circuitry, and I got that for breakup. This is a fairly clean amp.
Yes. I mean, like most of these amps, most people turn them up to the 8, 9, and then they use the volume control.
Right.
So,
yeah, a lot of people do. And then it's 12 watts?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And then 10-inch speaker. It's the original speaker in there. A lot of people do upgrade the speaker, but I'm going to leave it. Getting nice. Really responsive. If I was going... breaking up. This is, if I wanted to break up, I can use a pedal in my mind.
Yes. That's what most people do.
Right.
Use a Princeton and use a pedal that overdrives the way you want, and you get what you want.
Yeah. We got like telly players who use these a lot, and I can't wait to plug my telly in. Jim Campolongo, I'm kind of a fan of his, so he does this. Mike Campbell from Heartbreakers. This is his Desert Island amp. He says reverb, the Princeton reverb, but if you look at his rig for the last 20, 30 years, I think it's a Princeton amp like this, blackface, with a Tweed Deluxe, and that's been his rig. So, and then a Princeton non-reverb with a Tweed Deluxe. So those are the two players that I'm thinking of. I almost think Neil Schon used one way back in Journey and just cranked it up, but I have to double check that. Do you know of any other players?
Here's the thing. Back in the day, sometimes in the studio, they would use whatever was around that worked for the song. To me, there is no good or bad tone. It's how you apply it to a song.
You're right. Super happy with this. 12 watts, 2 inputs. Like the blackface, we don't need to do this. It will be quieter on input 2. And this has one less gain stage than the Princeton reverb.
Yes. Princeton Reverb's got the reverb circuit in there, so you have the added 2 for that, and then there's usually a reverb recovery. So
that is why the Princeton reverbs will break up more than this.
Yes.
But gigging amp, what do you think? I'm not going to use it to gig with.
No, here's the thing. It's fine to gig with if it's mic'd up and it's going through in-ear monitors or you have a wedge, but I don't think this would keep up with a drummer.
Yeah, especially the drummers I get to play with. Super big sound. So we're at 10 now. If I have my guitar at 10. Crank it. So right now I'm at, 8, and it's got that cool amp compression. I just heard it. That's nice. Let me just try a different pickup. Some new discoveries. I'm getting to know this amp. Sorry, I went off.
No. I was going to say, different guitars, different pickups. If you use a pedal in front, just to kind of kick the front end,
right?
You just have a lot of variables that you can do with this amp, and that's why it's such a popular recording amp.
Yeah, I'm super excited to record with it. Speaking of having a pedal up front, we have a Vemuram Jan Ray, and for as good as this sounds, Carl was telling me if you put a boost in front of it,
a clean boost,
which is what you'd call this, right? I got a lot more headroom. So I'm back down to 4.5 on my guitar. And I think we were making it chimey earlier, but
yeah.
I'll play the same thing just to give you a feel. That's 4.5. We're up to 8. Try another pickup. humbucker. And that did break up a little finally on that humbucker. So
Plus, on the pedal, you have volume, gain, treble, and bass. So you can still tailor a lot pre-EQ into the amp. So,
okay.
you know.
Nice. Let me just spank it hard. Do a country thing. 10, 10, Vemuram. That's nice. And I asked Carl before this amp or any other amp, I asked him, if you hit the front end with a pedal really hard, will you hurt the amp? And
you won't hurt the amp, but you can make it sound like garbage. Yeah, that's basically, you know, if you push it too hard, it's going to get too compressed, too mushy. It's just not going to sound good. So
nice.
The whole idea is to take a clean overdrive and just give it just that boost that the amp breaks up naturally further down in the amp from kicking it in the front.
I agree. I think we've talked about everything. Is, in your opinion, since you get to restore a bunch of amps and you work with amps daily, this is I'm assuming it's probably one of the nicer black faces you've got in a while? Or?
Yes. I mean, I did some cleaning on it, and you know, normal cleanup. I mean, I take like Dove and some hot water and put it on a brush, and I just kind of work it in, and it gets all that stuff over the years off, where it makes a big difference in the way it looks. Even down to, I take the knobs off,
yeah.
And I spray those. I take a toothbrush.
Yeah, we talked about it.
I don't know how many techs, you know, that have OCD that they actually remove the knobs and they're sitting there with the toothbrush. But you clean all that up, it almost looks like a different amp.
We got to talking when I walked in today to a shop, and it looked clean in my studio, but it was on the floor right here, and I was like, it looked brand new. So thank you so much.
No problem. I
am super excited about this. I've got a black face, a real one, and if you like what we're doing, please subscribe. If you have any more questions for Carl, he is the man. 1% Tech Audio here in Vegas, and from what I understand, even when they get backed up, Friedman sends you some amps to.
Well, if there's someone that needs a repair in Vegas, you know, and instead of having to ship the amp back there, Dave will send them my way.
Yeah.
And Dave, I really appreciate that.
Dave's the man.
I owe him. I'm going to owe him a bottle of something.
He's always so nice to me and Nam. I don't even know if he knows who I am, but we were talking, just a little tangent. I use the Dirty Shirley professionally, and I have a Dirty Shirley cabinet that I use everywhere. Sometimes I'll take a Blue Amp 1 with me for smaller gigs, but that cabinet goes with me. It's a 112, and I told him it's the best sounding cabinet I've ever had, and I'm a Marshall guy. I like Marshall cabinets, and way back when I had this little young theory that the best Marshall cabinets were the lighter ones.
Yep.
And Dave's Dirty Shirley cabinet is so light. I'm a small guy. I pick it up with one hand, throw it around. And it sounds so good. And I think I heard him, I'm not putting words in his mouth, say that he agreed that the lighter cabinets were the better sounding cabinets.
Yeah, he even talked about 4x12s, Eddie Van Halen's cab, them being uncovered, and it seemed the ones that were always lighter just seemed to sound better.
See, it was my ears from way back when I was touring, but yeah, that's so awesome. Well, since we're on that tangent, I'm about to sign off, but I was loading up last month my gear, and I loaded up on top of my Dirty Shirley cabinet onto the grill cloth, and it got stretched a little. Usually I load up on behind when I'm carting in. Is there anything you can do? Or I got a little divot in it now.
Probably not.
Okay.
The thing is, this grill cloth is real fragile, and once you get a rip or a tear or a dent, not really much you can do.
Got it. Okay, I'm sorry.
But it's got character.
It does. I don't care. It sounds so good.
Yeah.
And I remember telling that to Dave. Like I said, I don't know if he knew me from Adam, but I met him back when I was with Rando Amps, and they were right across Rando, so you got to see his BE 100 all day and listen to that. And And I mentioned that I didn't know if it would cut the bigger gigs, and I will happily say it has been cutting the bigger gigs with the mic and stuff. But he was so cool. He's like, we'll build you a 212 dirty shirted cabinet.
Yeah.
So
he's
nice.
He's always
So
like
nice.
that to help people out, and especially the artists and stuff like that. He will go out of his way to make sure that everyone's taken care of, from the main artist to anyone that buys his product.
Right.
So.
All right, so we talked about the Princeton, this renovation of a 1966 Fender Princeton amp, non-reverb, renovation done by Carl Popek at 1% Tech Audio, and a couple Dave Friedman tips. Showed him some love. So thank you. Until next time, Carl and Mundo, aloha.